Now I will proceed to present my Global Age research project. The first chapter of the book deals with globalization. In this chapter, we were required to look into forecasting tools for trade, and we were also required to look into the foreign direct investment confidence index. These resources resulted to be very useful for me. In fact, that was my main takeaway. Then my personal finding was that I didn't know that there were valuable free resources to do business research on the internet. And also, it is very important to understand that both of these will result really useful when trying to look for business opportunities, because you will be able to somehow predict what trade areas will be more relevant in the future, so that then you can adjust your business model to be able to take advantage and benefit from these trade regions or trade routes. One chapter was national differences in political, economic, and legal systems. The main takeaway from this chapter, and especially the research task, was that doing business in one country varies from doing business in another country. In some countries it is easier, in some countries it is more difficult. The research tag, the most valuable part is that they were able to provide us with new resources that we could look into to be able to find out where is it easier for us to do business and how political and economical systems influence the way we do business in a determined country. Chapter 3 was natural differences in economic development. The main takeaway of this chapter was to understand that in different countries the economic development is different. It's not the same, the economic development of Japan to, for example, my country, Venezuela. Therefore, the different business strategies and the approach to do business in each country will be different. The research task in this case required us to compare, for example, the risk of doing business in Argentina, China, Poland, Egypt, and South Africa. It was very, very interesting because in Global Age there are many tools that enable you to be able to compare these countries and find out what is the level of risk that you have of doing business in each country and why. So this is definitely very useful if you are interested in exploring the idea of, for example, doing business in Venezuela and you want to know what risk is there involved, and you need to be aware of what can happen, if you do business in that country. So this is why this research task was really important. Chapter 4 dealt with differences in culture. As we know, humans vary from one another. Also, it is important to know that culture in different countries varies from one another. For example, culture here in the US is very different from other countries in Asia. The research task in this case, they require us to look for information of, for example, if you wanted to go ahead and do business in Chile, how would you present? What were you supposed to do in order to give a good impression to those people that you are meeting? This was extremely useful and extremely important because we were provided with different websites that give that kind of information. One was a guide called Business Etiquette Around the World. This guide tells you exactly what are the common things that are done when you meet a person for the first time in a foreign country and how you should behave. This is extremely useful for people that want to go ahead and do business in another part of the world, because they will be able to know what to expect and what is normal and what is traditional in those places. Chapter number 5 was titled Ethics, Corporate Social Responsibility, and Sustainability in International Business. This chapter basically dealt with human rights practices. It is important to know that in some countries the human rights are not as respected as there are here in the US. For example, we have heard many times that there are countries in Asia or in Africa that allow child labor, and that many of the products and things that we use were fabricated or produced thanks to child labor. However, in this research task, we were asked to look into countries like Brazil, Russia, India, and China, which are mainly developing countries, in which we could take a look in the way that they respect these human rights and how much they protect their employees or their working class. So there were very interesting findings. For example, India and China being obviously the most left behind in terms of rights, and Brazil and Russia being more protective for employees and the working class in their country. This is very important in business. Well, for example, when you are picking business partners, you want to be able to partner with somebody that you know that is corporate responsible and that takes care of the community around them. Chapter 6 was titled International Trade Theory. In this chapter, we were required to look for suppliers. This was very interesting because the research task asked us to, for example, look into potential suppliers from Australia that produce premium wine. So, and then we had to develop a list of criteria for these suppliers. This was very interesting to me because I was able to place myself in the position of a business owner who is looking for a new endeavor. For example, bringing wine from Australia to the US, and then develop a sort of criteria to know which provider should I choose, which provider should I pick, which provider or supplier brings the most value to me and my customers. This was very useful for me because, like I said, in business, this is one of the tools that will be extremely useful to be able to know how to find suppliers and then to be able how to pick one of these suppliers. Chapter number 7 was titled Government Policy and International Trade. In this chapter, we were able to look into the regulations of importing and exporting in different products of a pharmaceutical company that was exploring the idea to invest in New Zealand. So this research task was actually very important because I could place myself in the position of a strategist and look into what are some trade barriers that I could face if I was trying to introduce a new pharmaceutical company in New Zealand. I realized that there were many barriers since in New Zealand the pharmaceutical industry is controlled more harshly by the government. And because of this reason, there was actually not a good market for a pharmaceutical company to try to enter the New Zealand's market. Therefore, this kind of resources will result extremely useful when you are exploring the idea of entering new markets. If you already have a business model and you want to expand to another country, it is good to be able to place yourself in the position of a strategist, find information of what are the trade barriers that you can find in those countries that you want to expand, and then from then on try to develop a strategy if you think that you will benefit from entering this market, or on the other hand, looking another way and trying to find another country that is more beneficial to your company. Chapter 8 was titled Foreign Direct Investment. This chapter was especially interesting to me because being from Venezuela, there were many foreign companies that invested in the oil industry. In this chapter, the research task required us to look into sort of an insurance and also developing countries if you wanted to For example, if you had a constructing company, how would you be able to know that once you go to one developing country, you will be able to be insurance, you will be able to have insurance, and your investment and your task that you were performed in that country you were not gonna be deceived in business. So obviously this research task was very important to me because it made me aware of the fact that it is actually possible to be able to insure yourself and the company when you are trying to do business abroad, so that you are not deceived. Chapter number 9 was titled Regional Economic Integration. And this was very interesting to me also, a very interesting chapter. We were asked to look, for example, at the World Trade Organization and look into trade agreements. One that was very interesting was Japan, because there is a very big integration of Japan and Asia with other countries, such as Taiwan, China, South Korea, and I was not aware of that, and then I became aware that actually there are many businesses that benefit from this economic integration. Another economic integration that we were asked to look into was COMESA. This is an economic integration that takes place in Africa, and the aim of these economic integration, is to be able to foment business and economic development in the regions. This was very interesting and is very useful actually in business, because you are able, as a professional, you are able to look into economic integration and business model that can benefit from, for example, reduced tariff, or sometimes you don't have to pay taxes from bringing one product to another. So it was actually very, very beneficial to know that businesses and different companies can benefit from these economic integrations among countries. Chapter 10 was titled The Foreign Exchange Market. The main takeaway of this chapter was actually just that, being able to become aware of the different exchange rates that are going on from country to country, and that these exchange rates fluctuate, and how, for example, how do you convert Japanese yen into US dollar? Holding what currency is more beneficial to you? Those were the questions that were addressed in the chapter, and were the questions that were addressed in the research task. So this is actually very useful to know, because from a professional standing, you need to be aware of what currency is actually more beneficial for the business model you are in. Finally, chapter 11 was titled The International Monetary System. This was definitely a very, very interesting chapter, because we were able to actually comprehend why the monetary system works the way that it works. We were asked in the research task of this chapter to look into the financial stability report, and we were also asked to look into the Deutsche Bank research reports and analyze, for example, what were the developing countries, how was the future looking for developing countries such as Brazil, China, or India. So this was definitely one of the most recent chapters, but also was one of the research, these were some of the research tasks that provided more useful resources, because I was able to become aware that there is something called the Global Financial Stability Report that allows you to understand what is the current financial standing of the world as a whole, and what is it that is going on financially, so that strategists and business owners can plan ahead and take advantage of these reports to develop a strategy to face the future trends of the market. Thank you so much, guys, for looking and paying attention to my presentation. and I hope that you guys have learned something very useful.